Hello, welcome to my tutorial on the Jesse Crossbody Bag by UhOh Creations. I love this pattern so much, I made 3 bags before it was even released. I hope you find the tutorial helpful. Without further ado, we'll get started. Happy stitching. Okay, so with the last bag you saw I did vinyl on the body and cotton woven on the flap. I'm changing it up today and I'm going to do cotton woven for the bag, for the body, and I tried to fussy cut it, but this is quite expensive fabric and you can't get any more now, or I can't. So I really didn't want to, it was going to be a large area to waste. It's quite a big print and it's not repeated that often. And I just realised I was going to waste so much material, I just didn't have the heart to. So I've cut it and carefully chosen what I want on show. And I've marked the pattern pieces, and I've marked that wrong. But I chose this for the front on one side and this piece for the front on this side because it's pretty with the butterflies and it's not going to match. I couldn't do anything about that. But it's going to look nice anyway. It's just going to be pretty with the details of what I've got on the front. So that's the main body panel, and I'm also doing the slip pocket that I'm making inside in the exterior fabric, and this is 8 by 12 inches that I've cut, so it's 8 across, 12 inches down. And then I've also done the zip pocket pieces in the same material. I think it's lovely when you open up a zip pocket, especially when the lining's plain, and there you see a pop of colour and a pretty pattern. So I have done that just for that reason. Now, one of the pieces I cut 1/2 inch shorter. It's just because you're going to end up with 1/2 inch difference, but you'll see anyway, and it's fine. Just cut them the normal size if you want to, both the same size. That will avoid confusion. But just in case you saw that I had 1/2 inch difference, I've jumped ahead. But I do suggest that you cut out both pieces according to the pattern measurements. I don't give the pattern measurements on the video because it's giving away pattern information, which I don't like to do. So that's the exterior fabrics and the inside pocket pieces. Then we've got our lining, which I've just done in plain black. I've got the lining for the flap. I've got the 2 lining panels and the zipper facing, and I've interfaced all of these items, but all the cotton I have interfaced, and I've used something that's called cotton woven that I buy from Shirley Evans on Crackers Fabrics Facebook group. It's amazing value and it's so strong, it's really lovely. So that's what I'm using. And then we've got the flap. I'm using vinyl for the flap just to be a change. So I've done that, and I've already fused some fleece to it, and I've done it a lot smaller than the flap. So I've just given, it's just to give it a bit of strength because this vinyl is ultra thin, and on its own I just felt it wasn't very stable. I just didn't like it on its own, so I just put the fusible fleece. If you have vinyl that's got that felt type feeling on it, you don't need to add the fusible fleece. With the stabilizer, I'm using the headliner. As I said, this is 2mm thick stabilizer headliner. So this is for the flap, and again I've cut it smaller so that we don't have the bulk in the seams. And then we've got the headliner for the main panels, which may throw you, because you've got the main panels that are shaped like this and the headliner that's shaped like this, and you use the interior main pattern piece for that. And that's because of how the headliner will be attached to the bag, which you will see as we go along. With the hardware that I'm using, I'm looking for my, oh, there's a zip pull. I always use continuous zips. I never buy single zips. And to attach my zip pull, there is a knack to doing it without using those gadgets and forks, etc, etc. And that is, I cut the two sides at different lengths. I'm right-handed, so I start with the right side being longer by probably about just under 1 centimetre longer, and I do a diagonal cut. Then I cut the left side shorter. If you're left-handed, you may want to do the opposite. I'm not sure, I don't know how that would work, but I always start on the right side and I just slip the zip pull onto the teeth, slide it down, and then it meets the opposite side, and I just put that on, slide it down the teeth, and I don't know why, but when I do film doing this, it doesn't look very easy, but trust me, I don't normally do it straight away. So we slide it on, just slide it down a little bit to start it off. Put your fingers on the two pointed areas and pull, and there's your zip attached. Dead easy. And then all I do is trim off the edges and just like this to seal the ends and stop them fraying. So that's all the hardware. So we're going to get started now. The first thing I'm going to do is the flap. So we'll get started with that. The first thing I want to do, which isn't mentioned in the tutorial, is to add my handmade label to my flap. It's up to you whether you add it onto the flap or your bag, but it would be very low down on your bag. For instance, here's, I put the handmade label. You could put it there, but I think it's better on the flap, to be honest with you. So what I'm doing is measuring 4 inches. In fact, I'm going to measure 3.5 inches from the bottom. And then mark in the centre. And I'm just going to draw a little line there to show on the straight. And I always check which slots the prongs of the label go into, and they go in last but one. So I place my washer over the lines I've made, and the line I made in the centre is there, and then I draw my lines there. So that's prepared, and then I get my craft knife, and I'm just going to check, because that does look a bit low to me, but it's probably a trick of the eye. Oh yeah, that is right. Excuse me. So okay, and then we just pop the label on. And I always get my rubber mallet just to flatten them down nice and flat. So that's the Handmade label, dead simple to put on. And now we need to put the two panels together, right sides together. Like so. I'm not adding the headliner yet, I'll pop that in after. So we're going to now stitch all the way round, 3/8 of an inch seam allowance all the way round, but leave the top unstitched. Okay, so I've stitched all the way round, and as you can see, the fusible fleece is really quite far in from the edge. Firstly, it always shrinks when you iron it. Well, it does for me. But secondly, I didn't want it close up to the seam. We're going to have the foam near it, and when we top stitch, I like a nice sort of flat edge, crisp edge. So before we turn it right side out, we need to cut some notches in the curve. Very important to do this. You can, if you want to, just do snip lines, but when you snip a line, let me show you. You snip a line, when it folds over, it folds like that and then like that. So you're creating a lump. If you cut a notch, you fold it over, and you're not, there's no lump there. So I always cut notches rather than the lines. So that's all the notches cut that I want to cut, and I'm going to turn it right side out. And as you can see, with the fleece alone, because my vinyl is so thin, it's really quite floppy and not great. So now I'm going to slip the headliner in. And I didn't stitch it into the seam, I just didn't want that bulk right at the seam. So I slip it in afterwards, and once we've put the twist lock in here and the rivets up here and stitched it on, the headliner doesn't move, it doesn't slip down, it stays where it's meant to stay with no trouble. So I'm finding that the headliner is a really nice fit. I just want to adjust it so it lays completely flat. Make sure it's right tucked into the end. It's worth spending time at this stage to fit it properly. Like so. And I'm going to press it from this side just to get it to try and stay a little bit flat. And then I'm going to top stitch the flap, but we only top stitch so far. We measure, at the moment it's 4.5 inches. We don't think it's going to change because I think we all found that was a good length, but do check the pattern. for on number 3 under prepare the flap and strap, and it will give you the measurement there just to make sure in case it does change. So I'm marking my line all the way across, and I don't have to worry about this being heat removable pen. Worst case scenario, I would just steam over it because you can't iron it, but this actually wipes away with water, so it's great. So I've marked my line. I'm going to top stitch from there all the way around and stop there. So I've top stitched all the way around here, and it's like that on the back. And now we put the flap aside for now, and the next thing we're doing is the strap. I'm doing vinyl strap, but you can do a woven one if you want to, we need to, you can either draw a line down the centre like I am, or if it's woven you can fold it in half lengthways and iron it, iron a crease in it, then open it up and bring the 2 edges in from the 2 sides into the centre. Now with the ends there's a choice. You can fold the ends over first, then you'll be bringing the edges in like so, and that's very rough, but you get the idea. There's no raw end. But I like to use these strap ends. I just think they look really nice, so I'm not folding mine over, but if you don't use them, do fold it over first before you do anything else. And then I'm not going to add Peltex. No, I'm not going to add fleece either, because it's a crossbody bag. It's not going to be carrying lots of weight like a tote bag would. So I don't need to add the fleece into the strap to give it some body, because it can stay nice and light. So I'm putting double-sided tape the whole length of one side of the line. Now this tape that I'm using is a craft tape. It's not sewable. It would gum up the needle, but it's much tackier than the sewable ones. So I tend to use this on areas where I'm not going to sew, which I'm not. We're going to sew along the edge, but it's not going to hit either of the tape, because I'm leaving a space away from the centre line, which will become, excuse me, the folded edge. So as long as you stay away, I mean, it doesn't matter if it hits it occasionally, but you just can't really sew the whole length. So, and I bought this from Amazon. It's just a generic craft tape. So if I was folding over the edge, I'd do this as well, but as I said, I'm not. So I start now. I do not take it right to the line. I leave a bit of a gap, and I do this with both sides. The reason being is if we fold it to the edge, when we fold this over, it will automatically push them away or bulk them up, and you don't get a good look. So if you leave a slight space, it allows for a very neat fold and a flat edge. And if I was adding Peltex, because it's sort of thick, I would actually leave a bigger distance, and I would cut the Peltex 3/4 of an inch to 7/8 of an inch wide, not an inch, not the size of the strap, because that would end up making the strap wider than it should. Right. Some of the interfacing is coming away, it hasn't fused properly, so that's okay, it's not the end of the world. Bit of a pain, but all I'll do is I'll just fold that over first, and then I'm going to put my iron on. This doesn't get seen, this side of the, it's good that it's happened so I can show you what to do, but this side of the strap doesn't get seen anyway. It will be folded in, so if we do mark the vinyl in any way on this side, it's not the end of the world. But what I'm going to do is re-press the vinyl using a Teflon sheet. Now these Teflon sheets you can buy in cookery shops as well, to use for non-stick, for baking, etc. They're very handy to have, and I use them for pressing. And if this doesn't work, all I'll do is, and it's not working, so that's no big deal. All I'll do is put some more tape down. I am just going to make sure that this is firmly fixed so that it doesn't happen on this side. I obviously didn't fuse it properly there because it's stuck everywhere else. At least you see it happens to us all. And yes, I've ironed my line, but I can see where to go to because of the first row. So yeah, there's no big issue. And then I get my roller, okay, and then we start on this side, and again just leave a little gap. So you can see it's a couple of millimeters apart. And if this side starts to unravel, I'm not too fussed, because once we fold it together, it will hold. Okay, so I'm going to now put a line of tape. I'm going to do it along the centre of one side, because I'll be stitching along here and along there. So I can use my sewable double-sided tape if I want to, but it's not as sticky, so I tend not to use it on vinyl if I can help it. Right, so this is why we did this. If you see, as we fold it, they come together, and if we didn't have that gap, it would cause an issue. And we want to make sure that these edges are lined up perfectly. Otherwise, you'll have an unsightly strap. And if you find you don't line it up properly, you can pull it. It will allow you to pull it off once like that, and then put it back on. So, I mean, I'm really speeding through doing this. Okay. So I'm going to roll it. It helps the tape stick, and it gives you a bit of a smarter, crisper edge. This is a leather roller. I just got it off Amazon. Just look for leather roller, and that's it. And now I'm going to top stitch all the way round on a long stitch, about 4 to 5 mils. Okay, so that's the strap nicely stitched, front and back. And now we want to add the slider. Now, I don't want to add the slider to the end that has the join, because it's very bulky and it will struggle a little bit. So make sure if you've done a join at one end to not put the slider on that first. So, let's pop and make sure you put it, as you put the handle on, the strap on, do it so that the join of the slider is there, because that's going to be on the inside and not seen. Now it's up to you how far in you put it. If you're going to top stitch it, bear that in mind with your machine. 1.5 inches should be okay. I'm going to put 2 rivets on mine. I'm not going to top stitch. I prefer to use rivets. Now, because I'm just going to move that along for a minute. Because I use a strap end, I'm going to show you the placement for a rivet. The first placement will be 3/4 of an inch along, allowing for the strap end to be added. So the first rivet goes there, the second one 1/2 an inch further along, so I'll get my punch, and this is called a twist punch or a screw punch. This is made by the trimming shop, but I bought it on Amazon, so you can buy it either, well, to be honest with you, there's lots of brands out there, so they're everywhere. They're £6 or £7, and it's brilliant. So punch the holes. I never do 2 layers together, because when you do this, it can move, and then before you know it, you've got rivets coming out of the other side to one side of your strap, and they look awful. So I always do one at a time. Now, bearing in mind, what I do is I judge for adding the rivet and the press getting in the slot, so that I'm happy with this length. A little bit less actually, yeah. And I then put my pen through the holes to mark where I want to do the next hole. Okay, so obviously if you're not adding rivets, you don't need to watch all of this, you could fall blind. But I very rarely stitch this. I always add rivets. I think they look nice as well. So that's the rivets added, and you see what I mean, that they're in the right place, they haven't moved, they're not off to one side. And if I get my strap end, I can show you. I don't know where I've put them now. You're probably looking at them. I'm not adding it just yet, I will shortly, but I'll just show you that. Being temperamental. You want it to be a tight fit, so I've gone too far. You don't want it to be loose, so that's good that it's a. If we'd have used Peltex, I wouldn't have gone to the end either, because it wouldn't fit. So I'll just stop short. But so that you get the idea. So that's the space. It's going to be on straighter than that. So now you get your gate ring. Or spring ring, whatever you're using. And add one, and then you want to go back through the slider I don't even need to add that spring ring now. I mean, I can, because I've got the ring that I can go through it, I can add it when I want to, but I'm just adding it now to show you. I'm going to have to use pliers because I don't have very strong fingers. That's it. Just to get that through. Just want to pull it through a bit more. I've got to get it past that thick join. Once I've done it, it's done permanently then, but it's getting it past initially. I've got to cut. I cut my finger quite badly in the kitchen, and so I can't use that finger to pull it because it keeps pulling the cut. So, right, goodness me. Pull that through that side. Sorry if I'm coming off screen a minute, that's better. So, that's much easier. And then you've got the spring ring here. And I'm going to do exactly the same as I did before with the rivets. So to recap, when I find my pen, there, oh dear, 3/4 of an inch from the edge, and then 1/2 an inch, put it on the poly board. So, although it's a self-healing mat, I don't really want to gouge big circular grooves in it. I haven't gone all the way through yet. And you just need to make sure that the folded edge is going to be right. See, I was going to put that wrong. That would look awful. So you do need to make sure that you've got your strap like this, so you're sort of upside down, and then you fold this way. So always double check that. I always do. So that's the strap there made. All I need to do is add my strap ends, which I will do, and then I'll set the strap aside for later, and we'll come back to construct the exterior. Okay, for the exterior main panels, we're going to sew these together. Now earlier on I mentioned about choosing what side I want as the front and what side I want as the back. And if we fold it like this to look at the front of the bag, and this is the pieces that I want on the front, the ones with the butterflies, perfect. So we're going to be joining the back together first, and I've written F on here for the front. I completely wrote the complete opposite of what I should have done to remind me of which one was front and back. But there you go. So that was that plan foiled. So we stitched together at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so I open this up and press the seams open. Okay, and then we need to get our foam or fleece, whichever you're using. If you're using fusible fleece, fuse it now. But if you're using headliner like I am, which is not fusible, I'm just adding a row of double-sided tape along the centre or thereabouts. Doesn't have to be exact. And remove the backing, and then place this centrally over. I'm going to turn it upside down so I can see here as well, and place it as evenly as you can, just to hold it in place. And now what we need to do is top stitch either side of the seam. So I've stitched either side, and as you can see, the headline is now attached to the bag. I'll move that ironing pad. And we need to get our flap that we made earlier. Now, I would like to say, if you've decided not to add a twist lock and you want to add a magnetic snap, now's the time to do it before you seal off the end. So you can use the pattern piece. Lots of rustling. You can use the pattern piece here that says the lock placement, and you can use that as a guide to where you want to place your magnetic snap. So turn over, mark for your magnetic snap, then carefully raise that so that you're not going through both sides. If you use a small poly board like I do for my twist punch, you can insert this inside so that you don't go through whilst you cut the two lines for the prongs. Install the magnetic snap, and there you go. But I'm doing a twist lock, so none of that's relevant. Okay, so at the moment, the measurement for what we're doing next is 4.5 inches. But it's possible that may change between now and the pattern release. So don't take my word for it. Check out on page 4 the measurements for where you place your flap. Like I say, currently it says 4.5 inches from the bottom edge, but that may well change. So I'm going to do the 4.5 inches. I don't think it will, in all honesty, because it has worked perfectly. So I do think that it's going to stay at 4.5. and I'm going to draw a line and mark 3 inches either side, just as a mark to a guide for placing the flap. I don't know if you can see that, whether it's coming out very well, but that's the line I've drawn along there. And then I just want to lay some double-sided tape quite close to the line, but not on the line, because I don't want it to show through from the back of the flap. And I'm careful not to use too wide a tape, because this is going to convert to a pocket, and if the tape is very wide or high up, you're going to feel that, and it's not going to be very pleasant. So be mindful of the double-sided tape. And I'm just going to mark the halfway point for the flap. Like so. Oh, goodness me. The other thing to do, we need to fold the ends in. So I need to trim. I'm sorry, I nearly forgot that. I'm just so glad I remembered. We just need to trim the foam and fleece a little bit, so that we can fold the edges in. So I'm just going to trim 1/2 inch off. She says, looking for her rotary cutter. Okay. If your stabiliser, whatever you've used, is sat low enough, you may not need to trim, but I did in order to fold the edges in. And although I did that straight, it's a bit wonky, so it must have gone in a bit wonky. That's it. Okay, so what I'm going to do is get some double-sided tape and place it along the edge. And do it along both edges, both sides. Like so. And folding one side in, and removing the tape backing on the other side. and I want it to be the same height, so I will fiddle about with getting it even. It's very important to make sure it is equal. And make sure that that's straight. Yes, that's straight. So, okay. And then I'm just going to place some more double-sided tape on the folded edges now. Okay, so that's held that in place nicely. And now we go back to what we were doing. So now I've got to mark the centre point again. And then I'm going to use the centre seam to line this up. And the line as a guide being straight. I'm just pressing that down, and now I'm going to flip this over carefully. And the thing I want to do now is to make sure that this is central here, that it hasn't gone a bit skew-iffy. So I'm going to measure again for the halfway point. Okay, so I'm happy with that. So I'm just going to slip a couple of quilting clips. I got these from Amazon. I'm sure I'm going to be asked about them. Sewing clips for quilting supplies. So that's just what I searched for on Amazon, sewing clips, and found these. So they're very handy, especially for vinyl. Okay, so that's fixed in place. And now we take it to the machine and we stitch down the edge, along and up, and then come back down, along and up with a bit of a gap. So you want 2 rows of stitching. Here we have it. I've sewn 2 rows of stitching, which you can see on the back here more easily. And then what I've gone ahead and done is punched some holes for rivets. This isn't in the pattern, you don't have to, but it looks nice. I did it on the other bag, so it's like that. So what I did was I marked a 1/4 of an inch up from the edge and a 1/4 inch in from the edge, and I made sure I didn't cut through the stitching, because if you do that you're going to have a problem with it unravelling on you. And I was going to use my 8-inch post rivets, but they're a little bit too short, I think. So, and obviously this is a nice way to reinforce this flap in place. So there we have all the rivets in place. And now for the fun part. We just need to mark for the darts before we do this next part. And I'm just going to trim the foam so it's going equally either side. That's better. It's more even now. And we need to get, I'm going to get a permanent marker, because if we iron anything before we do it, the marks will disappear. So use a permanent pen, as long as it doesn't go through your fabric to the other side, and draw a line like so, and then again here, and it will become clear when we come to sew our darts. There we go. And now we need to join the other sides together, also at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Right, so I've stitched the seam, and as before we press the seam open, and then I get my double-sided tape again, okay. I'll turn it upside down so it's easier for me to see this area. And that area is good. Okay. And then this time, to stitch down the centre, we have to form like a tunnel and put the machine through. And if you can stitch all the way to the end, great. If you can't, stop halfway, pull the thread out, don't cut it, So you've got leaving a longish thread, then turn it around, start again, and when you meet it, pull that thread out too, don't cut it. Then when you take it off the machine, either put both threads on a needle and push them through to the other side, or go to the back and pull on the thread that's the bobbin thread through the back, and the top thread should just come through enough to hook it and bring it through. Either way, put the long threads through to the back and tie all 4 threads off, bobbin thread and top threads. Tie them off. So that's the other way to do it. But I'm hoping to do it in one go. It just depends on how the flap behaves. Okay, so here's the stitching for the front, and now we need to get this pattern piece for the lock placement for the male lock. So we just mark where it needs to go, and then I get the washer and fight to get it off. It's a little bit bent, so I'm going to straighten that up so it has better placement. So that's a bit straighter. Get the washer. I think that looks about right. I'm going to mark and see. I may have to change it. And I'm very meticulous. Every tiny amount matters. So that's a quarter. That's a little bit more than a quarter. I thought that looked a bit off. So I get a darker pen. And I'm going to mark 1/2 inch marks as a better guide for where this needs to be, so it's more evenly placed, so that these lines are guiding me where I need to go. And I also need to go down a little bit, so okay, so I'm happy with that. And I just need to get my poly board so that I don't go through to the other side, because that would be a disaster at this stage. And okay. It was going to be a good fit. So what I'm going to do, which I should have done, was just heat my iron up. Now that I've got the lines done, to go over the marks, because otherwise it's a bit of a fiddle to get rid of them once the lock's on. That's it. Okay. And then put the washer on. And push the lock prongs down, and as I did before, I get my mallet to flatten them down. So that's the male lock fixed in place. So now we need to turn the bag inside out again. And it's time to do the darts. And what we need to do is fold here and place the darts like so. And we need to stitch from the dot, from the cross here up until we meet at the end, all the way to the top. Don't go past this portion here, because well, you need to keep it open. You'll see why. So I'll do that side, then I'll do the same on this side, and then on the opposite side again. I'll come back and show you. So I've sewn the darts in place and not gone over the line. So what we need to do now is, the reason why we don't sew past that place is so that we can stitch along here. It's a bit hard to explain, but you will see what I mean when you come to do it. Just keeping the lining out of the way for the minute, the headliner I mean, just while I line this up. It's very important to line up the seams on here. If you don't, you're going to end up with a skewy looking bag. So you want it to be nice and uniform. So I've lined up the seams and pin them in place. That's it. And then for the rest of it, we line up, and you can either keep the headliner in with it, or you can take it out of the way to sew. And I'm not going to sew all the way along there very easily with the headliner in the way. So the best thing to do, I personally think, is to line up the edges of the fabric first, so that you know you've got them evenly placed. So, and now I can place the headliner if I want to, and then I can just sew right across. And I just need to recap on what the seam allowance will be. yeah, so 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way across the bottom there. I know we have 3/8 inch seam allowance, so I do apologise. No, it's 3/8 inch seam allowance, so we sew a 3/8 inch seam allowance all the way across. So I shall do that and come back. Right, I've sewn all the way across, and I just want to show you, I started and stopped at this notch as well, this seam, the point that we did for the darts, and that will give you a nice smooth finish. And I'm just going to remove the excess headliner out of the seam allowance. Just to help reduce the bulk. And then once we've done that, we just need to cut some notches in the curve of the bottom to help it sit nice and smoothly. Okay, and as before, once I found my scissors, we do the triangles. There. I've done that for speed, so I shall just tidy up these little notches and remove the excess parts. And then we need to turn the bag the right way out and put it aside for later on when we put the lining together with the exterior. Okay, so we're going to start with the zipper pocket first, and preparing the zipper pocket. And we need to get one piece of the pocket lining and make it so it's right side up, and the print, if you're using a directional print, is in the right direction as you're looking at it. And I'm just going to put some double-sided tape along the top edge. And if, like me, you've cut one of the pocket lining pieces 1/2 inch narrower, so still the same width but 1/2 inch less deep, should I say, then you're starting with the bigger of the two panels, like so. So you start with the bigger one. And we lay the zip with the zipper pull to the left side with the zip closed. And we just want to stitch along there at 1/8 inch seam allowance. And now we turn it round, and with this panel right side up and also with the direction going the correct way, which for me is that way, We do the same on this side. With a double-sided tape. And we make sure that the sides are also evenly lined up. And stitch along there at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. And once we've stitched along them, we're going to press the zip open. Now we get a lining panel and we get the zipper facing piece. And we want to draw a line 3/4 of an inch up from the edge all the way along. And then measure 3/8 of an inch up from that. I've basically done mine upside down. It's probably confused you a bit, but if you look, each side is 3/4 of an inch, so it doesn't matter which way round you do it. And then 1 inch from each edge, draw a line. And now we want to place this zipper facing 1.5 inches down from the top edge. So I'm just going to measure, so that's 12 3/4, that's 3 3/4. So we want to lay it uh, 1 7/8 of an inch, I believe. I'm just checking that. Yes. So for the centre, well, I tell you what, never mind that. Let's just do it this way because this will be much easier. I don't know why I'm trying to be technical with maths. So we draw a crease in the lining. How's that? That's much better, isn't it? I've always got to try and be a bit smart. And I'm not. Trying to halve 3 3/4 was just doing my brain in. So we fold the zipper facing in half and then mark a line on that crease. Then 1.5 inches down from the edge, I've lined up the mark that I've made. We lay the zipper facing. How much easier was that? Oh, goodness me. Sometimes I do like to overcomplicate things. So we just pin this in place. I'm going to double check that it didn't move. It's 1.5 inches and I've not done 1.5 inches. I've done 1 1/4 inches. Silly me. So that's better. check again. Yeah, see, measure twice all the time, whether it's cutting months or sewing months. And now we're just going to sew around the box that we've drawn. Okay, so I've stitched around the box. I'll just iron this away so you can see. So that's my stitching. And now we want to draw a line halfway up. So like so. So halfway up the box, so like that's 1.5/8 of an inch, and I stopped at 3/8 of an inch at each end, and just drawing out lines diagonally like so. And then what we need to do, if I can find my rotary cutter, which I keep putting away and I don't know why I do when I know I'm going to have to use it, is to cut from the tip of the triangle we've drawn to the other side, and then carefully cut out to the corners, but do not go into the stitching. Cut just before it. I normally use my snippers, but I've mislaid them at the minute. So I'm having to be very careful with my big scissors. Okay, so now we need to pull this through to the other side. Oh, I haven't gone all the way through there. That's it. Okay. And then press. I like to make sure that the seam is just slightly turned through to the back so that it's not seen from the front. And then I'm turning it upside down so I can see it better. Yeah, I'm happy with that. So now we get the zip lining, the pocket lining piece that we've made, and with the zip pull closed and to the left, we'll be laying this over the top like so. And first of all, I want to get my double-sided tape and lay it along the edge. And I just remove one side at the moment, and then making sure that we're going over the centre. And then I'm pushing the zipper pull through, and we peel this side of the tape, like so. And then we take it to the machine and stitch all the way around the box. Okay, so that's that sewn all the way around, and I've folded down the top piece down, and before we do anything else, I turn the hem up on the bottom of the pocket, and you'll see why. Because by doing this and making sure that the edges are even, when we have turned our bag, now we're going to stitch down there and stitch this here, and when we turn our bag, our seam will be ready done to stitch closed. No trying to fold it in and getting it even and so on. And so that's what you need to do. Now I stitch 1/4 inch down the edge. So that's the pocket ready, and the only thing I've got left to do on this is to add my label. And if you haven't added labels to your bags before, I'll show you what it is that I do to attach mine. And the first thing I do is just flick a lighter over the ends to get rid of the raw edges and stop it fraying. And then I get my double-sided tape, and then I just put it on each end and fold over the raw edges of the tape. I get my labels made in the UK by Name Tape Express. They're on Etsy, but they've also got their own website. So, because again, I get asked, where'd you get this from? Where'd you get that from? It's not that I'm advertising them. I'm just saying where I got them from. Okay. So now what I want to do is just mark above the pocket and and mark the halfway point. Then I peel the tape off that I've added again to the ends. And don't forget, this is sewable double-sided tape. If you don't use sewable, it could become quite tricky. And then I just fold the tape in half, right sides together. Lay them over the line that I've made, the folded edge, that is. And then I just stitch down the sides, and that's that made. Nice and easy. So that's the label stitched on and the pocket completed, and I think it's lovely when you look in a pocket and see a pretty print, and that's what I like to do. Now we get the remaining lining piece, and I'm doing the slip pocket that I've cut at 8 inches across, 12 inches down, and it's just a simple case of folding it in half, wrong sides together, and stitch a 1/4 inch seam allowance down and along, stopping a few inches along, starting again and up. Okay, so I've sewn down and I double stitch over the pocket corners. It just reinforces them a little bit, and obviously you double stitch at the start and end. And then I just like to cut on this corner diagonally to reduce the bulk, and then obviously down on these corners. And then before we turn, I don't know why I did it over there, because now I've left lots of fluffy bits on the pocket, the lining. Before we turn, I just like to again fold the seam open. And then turn it over and fold back again, matching up the edges. So that that's ready pressed for when we stitch it closed. And then we just turn the pocket through. And I always push as far out as I can with my fingers before I then use my little tool to make sure it's pushed fully out. And this is my Clover Tracer Pen that I use, and you use this when you're using carbon paper and you're tracing over a pattern. It's more for dressmaking really, although I do have some printed patterns, paper patterns, so I would use it for that as well, for bags. There we go. And now I just want to press the pocket neatly. Right, the sides have curled in a bit, so what I need to do is just press them flat this way first. Like so. Then flatten them out so that the seams will be nice and flat as well. That's it. And just spend time neatening that edge up. And then I look at which way the pattern's going, because obviously it's a one-way pattern and I folded it over and that's the wrong way. Yes, this is the right way up. You can tell with the way the leaves are going. And I like to place this 2 inches down from the top. Again, let's do the old folding technique rather than measuring. Like so. I think I will measure. I'm measuring 2 inches down from the top. I'll place the slip pocket. No, I'm not. I beg your pardon, I haven't top stitched along the top there. So let's top stitch first. Okay, so now I've top stitched along the top of the pocket and I'm placing it again centrally. And pin it in place. And once I've pinned it, I'll measure again just to make sure it hasn't moved. So I'm just going to turn it upside down so I can see accurately. Yeah, that's fine. So now I shall top stitch or stitch it on all the way round. I'm not going to the very top, I'm going to stop short because I'm going to add rivets to the top corners. And if I stitch all the way up the top, once I punch through with the rivets, the stitching will unravel. Okay, so the bottom is now sealed and I haven't stitched to the very, very top. And I'm going to do this by eye, I don't need to measure. But you may, if you're doing this, you may want to measure if you're unsure of the accuracy. But it's relatively easy. So there we have that. Oh, it's heavy. And I'm trying to find the holes in this end. What am I like? Goodness me. Okay. So. I think the rivets serve two purposes. One, they keep the pocket fixed in place, and 2, they look pretty. Right, my rivet's gone on skew-iffy. Quite glad it's happened actually, so I can show you. The way, when you've done a rivet the wrong way, if it's gone off, there's something you can do. Now, I always go in with the post side at the top on the front, so that I always know where the back side is. You need to remove the back. So I get my little wire cutters, or whatever they're called. Yeah, I think that's what they're called. And I just go underneath and pinch it, being careful not to rip through the fabric, of course. And I get hold of the rivet that's all skew-iffy and keep tugging and pulling. It will come off like so, and that is how you get a rivet off. And you can see where my post went wrong. So it was my fault. I went in at the wrong angle, obviously. So put another one in. I love showing you how I get out of these little scrapes, so I don't mind them happening. And that's better. That's gone on properly. So there's my riveted pockets. Right, now we need to do the darts for the lining, which is slightly different to the exterior. And we just draw lines at 1/4 inch. Just gives you a guide for stitching. You don't have to draw the lines if you don't want to, but I do find that they can help. And we just fold them together . And then I just pin them in place, stops them slipping. And then you just stitch from the bottom to the top till you sort of literally go off. Double stitch at the start and end, and do all 4 darts like that. Okay, so all the darts are done. We now place the 2 panels together, and I find it useful to pop them in like so. And the first thing I do is line up the darts, because it won't show so much with the black lining, but generally it will be very painfully obvious if the seams aren't matched up, and it just looks so much better if they are. So this is the most important part when stitching the lining together. So I also open the seams up. Like so. Okay, so now we just want to make sure that the rest of the bag is equally together. And that's the curved part, so I like to make sure that they will be. And as for the sides, I'm happy just to stitch as they are. You may want to pin. And we stitch at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance all the way round. Okay, so I've stitched the panels together and turned them right side out, and I'll show you what I meant about the darts lining up. That's really important on both sides. And now we need to put the exterior with the wrong side out and the lining right side out, and put it so the zip pocket is at the back, and also pop your flap down inside. In fact, I'm going to take the lining out of the way for a minute so you can see. You need to fold it back and get it down in there as far as it will go, so you're not getting any issues with stitching around the top of the bag. So there it is down in there, and it's like folded up on itself. And then pop the lining in. And we don't have a seam on the side to match up with the lining seam, but we've got the peaks, and that's what we need to match up, the shape. So I open up the seam, and by the way, if you want to trim the seam allowance, you can. I don't find that it matters. In fact, I find it easier not to, because then it gives us not such a bulky seam. So and I like to put one on both sides so that you can pin the seam open. If it will go in for me. Right. Okay, so that's that side, and then this side, the same thing. So I'm moving the headliner out of the way so that I can line up the side seams perfectly. I should have pinned that in there actually. Okay, so that's the sides pinned. And now the rest of it should go relatively smoothly. Oh, before I stab myself, before we go any further though, do make sure you unzip your pocket. Okay, it's very important that you do that. And I'm going to quickly pin here and there. And you should find, if you've used the correct seam allowances and you've cut accurately, you should find that the panels fit together nicely and that there's no puckering and bagginess. You just pull everything flat. And then we take it to the machine, stitch at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, and just remember when you get to here you are going up and then down again. So I shall go ahead and stitch that. Right, I've I've stitched all the way around the top at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now, if you trim everything, you're going to end up with a ledge, like all the fabrics and a definite ledge in there. So going back to my dressmaking days, when you trimmed the seam, you trimmed them at different layers, at different levels. So the foam I've trimmed right back, and then one layer I'm going to trim in between the edge of the foam and the edge of the lining, because this is the main. So you've got 3 levels of fabric, and that layers them nicely, so it's like a ramp rather than a step. So that's what I always do. I'm going to continue just trimming this back, and then I'm going to turn my bag through the pocket, and then I'll come back and proceed with the next steps. Before I go off, I forgot to mention that because of the curves, we just need to cut some notches to help with a smooth edge. And with this section, the pointed bit, we need to just remove a good amount because it's classed as a corner really. So there we go, cut off both corners and do notches along the curved parts, and then turn your bag. Okay, so here's the bag right side out, and what I've done is I have pressed up here a little bit, but then what I do is I put the edge how I want it, and then I slip curved quilting pins all the way around to hold it in place so it doesn't move. If it was vinyl, I only make sure I only go through into the headliner, but as it's fabric, I've been able to go all the way through, it won't matter. And this way I get a very good result with top stitching, which I'm going to do next. So there's a couple of things left to do. Firstly, to do the female part of the lock, and then the grommets. So right, there we have the female part of the lock. And on the pattern piece itself, it has a place that you can mark for the lock. I've just punched a hole in the pattern piece so that it's easy for me to mark. I'm just moving it down a little bit to allow for the seam. Okay, what I'm going to do is, I haven't put a little mark there, but I really want to make sure that this is in the dead central place. So, measuring from one side to the other, it's 9 inches and 4.5 inches is the centre spot. And 1.3. So yeah, it's just about central there. So I'm happy with where that is centrally. and then placing the washer. Okay, so I've marked the area that I want to cut out, and I don't have that size or shape die to be able to use my green machine to cut it out. So I get my punch pliers, and in fact I'm not going to do that. I am going to use my craft knife. I think that'll be better. Okay, so this is what I mean. The lock, it shows these sort of teeth there, which I'm not over keen on, but it looks good from the outside anyway. I mean, it doesn't look really awful, but I'm just a bit fussy. But I'm happy with that. Okay, I just wanted to speak to you about the grommets. There's a few different types of grommets and sizes. There's large grommets like this, and this is 3/4 of an inch diameter in the hole across. So I have the correct size punch for this size grommets because I use them regularly, so it was worth buying. Then the small one is for the 10mm or 3/8 of an inch grommets, which this is the screw-in one, and they're very nice, very posh. And you have the 10mm hole punch, and you've also got these push together grommets, which are very good, but they don't quite do the same look as this, do they? So I tend not to use these very often, in all honesty. They're great for, like, if you're doing a drawstring bag, and you've got to have lots of eyelets, things like that. But generally on a nice handbag, no, I don't use them. And then the middle size, which escapes me, 1/2 inch. This size I use for 4-fit grommets that I've got, which are this size. And force fit grommets are literally, as it says, force fit, and you hammer them together. And I use like a tea towel or something over them to protect them from scratches, etc. I have a rubber mallet, but it doesn't really give enough pressure, so I use my little hammer here, or my husband does, to bang them in. Now, on the first bag I made, I used this size, and it went through all the layers. I don't have the bag, unfortunately. I have posted a picture of it, but it went through both the layers on the front like that there. I personally found it gave a smaller opening, which I didn't really want. I wanted a larger opening than that. So this second bag I put the 10 millimeter sorry, bag, grommets on. And I thought, oh, put them on the side with a swivel clasp on the strap. Genius. However, when I did do that, I went through the seams, so they started to unravel like this. It started to unravel. So that sort of damaged the bag, so I can't sell this now. So I have to, another bag I'll be using myself. So I realised that because of the side seam of the inside, I can't put them in on the side, unfortunately. So that didn't, because that also gave me a larger opening. So had I had the foresight, I would have double stitched to here on my seam, double stitched at the very top, and sort of preempted the fact that I was going to be cutting a hole through this part. But I didn't foresee that. I didn't know I was going to do it until the end. So lesson learnt, think about it in future. Now for this bag, the new bag, I thought, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to put a grommet on the front and a grommet on the back, and then go through the front and back. Perfect. And I'm going to use the force fit grommets, which is for this size. They're the only grommets that I do with this size as well. So I merrily cut the holes, and I thought I'll cut 2 holes and put them in so you can see them. Then I'll show you doing the holes for this. Only then I realised that I used 2 of the force fit last week on another bag, so I don't have 4 in stock. Oops, my bad. So I can't put the others in. However, I haven't obviously gone through the seam. I'm near it, but I haven't gone through it. And I thought, even with a swivel clasp, this would probably work. So I thought I'd test it out. And I've got a spring ring on these that isn't wanting to spring. I'm making a meal of it. It's a lot easier to put these on, but I'm just making it look hard. I do have gate rings as well now, so I didn't have any before. So I've got them in stock, so that's good. Right, so that one's gone on. And then put this one on. That went on a lot better. And it works, actually. Having them there, the bag's still, it's hard to show. In the picture I should be putting on, you'll see, but it actually works just to have the grommets there. The bag is perfectly balanced. It's not an issue. So I'm actually not going to put the ones on the back now. I don't need to. So I'm quite happy with going through one side. So you can do that as well. Go as close as you dare to the side seam, and then add your grommets. And as you can see, it is fine. Probably even better with a swivel clasp. So I need to make another strap anyway, so I'll put swivel clasps on them, so that the strap can swivel nicely. So that's the bag done, actually. That's the bag completed. You can look on YouTube easily enough on how to add grommets, press holes, cut holes, etc. with the green machine. So I'm sorry I haven't actually filmed it, but you can't really see from the angle above anyway that I'm doing it. So there's loads of YouTube videos out there on how to add grommets. So do take a look. Just type it in, how to install grommets, and there'll be loads of YouTube videos come up. So that's my bag. this is my tutorial. If you use this tutorial for making your bag, I'd be very grateful when you post your bags in any groups, including the UhOh Creations group, that you give a link to this tutorial, which you can do underneath the video. There's the share button and copy link, and you can copy the link from there and paste it. So it just, I don't monetize. I'm not doing these for financial gain. I just like to know I'm helping people. So by giving people the link, you're helping them in making their bags. And if you want to subscribe to my channel, by all means do. Press the subscribe button again underneath the video, and there's a little bell next to that. So when you've clicked on subscribe, a little bell will appear. Click on that and click all notifications so that you will get notifications of every tutorial when I post them or upload them. If you don't do the bell, you won't get notified. So there you have it. Love this pattern. It's the third bag I've made, and I don't very often make 3 bags. And that's my tutorial. That's my phone going off, so I beg your pardon. So yeah, I look forward to seeing your bags. Happy stitching.